Good morning, everyone. I think I have about 15 or 20 minutes to talk, right, about student? No? All right. I'll do what I can, 3 minutes, but I am going to tell a little story about the man, the bell, and the rope. Anyone know we have a church bell upstairs? Anyone ever visit that church bell? No? Some people have. Well, here's the thing. For the last 25 years, I've been very fortunate to be part of many of the committees and groups, and I've been in many nooks and crannies in the church. Not as many as Ken, but a few. And I'm going to share a little story that happened about 7 years ago, and it happened with a young man who's been a member of this church, Ian. Let's go to the next slide, please, Bob. All right, so this church is very interesting. When you think about challenges, what do we do well at this church? Right? We improvise, we adapt, we overcome. And it happens on a regular basis. You know, Brian's story today, very moving, but it's just another example how faith, with our can-do attitude, gets things done. Back in probably June of 2015, our bells stopped ringing. And it was a sad moment because all the youth deacons really enjoyed pulling that rope. It's funny, and you know, my boys were youth deacons, and everyone said, yeah, I want to pull the rope, I want to pull the rope. Well, one day it stopped. The rope had worn through. Bob, can you do the next slide, please? What happens is, if you look above and you look at the steeple, it's not a direct line, right? You'll notice the rope is in the corner of the narthex, but the steeple is in the middle. How does that work? I was going to say magic, maybe a little faith, but it's very simply, there's a big rope there. It's about the size of my two thumbs together. But like anything over time, it wears out. And as strong as that rope is, it didn't stand the test of time well. So let's go to the next slide, please. And you look at this and you'll say, boy, what a journey. How do we get this thing to work? And some of you may have noticed over the last few years, once in a while, I'll be sitting over in my little pew over there, get a piece of rope, and I'm practicing my knots for the scouts. The only way I get good is practice, right? Day in and day out. Well, finally, after 12 years, someone said, we need that skill. All right, next slide, Bob. So what happens is, I have a ton of pictures. I can't show all of them, but it was amazing when we got up there. Not only did we see the rope where it started on this floor, all the turns and twists to the second floor to the roof, but how it got to the steeple. And it got to this big wheel that rung the bell, and that wheel's over 150 years old. So it's very interesting. This is all about perspective, right? What do you learn when you look at something? For many of us, we see the church, and it's like the tip of the iceberg. We come in, we sit down, but we don't see the inner workings, things that are happening behind the scenes. I was fortunate to be able to ask Ian to volunteer to come up, because it was, let's put it this way, it gets warm up there. It was his day off. He was a young lad, 21. He was doing landscaping for Greenview. You might have seen him in the past. He would sit here and landscape the cemetery in between before going to school. Can we go to the next slide, please? But here's the thing. Ian was at this point, after being a youth deacon, after growing up in this church for 25 years, well, now 25, back then, probably 18, he was starting to see the underside, the nooks, the crannies, the things that made the church work. Some things you can see from the outside. You come by, you see the building, you see the bulletin, you see social media, you come for a sermon. But there's a finely tuned machine that makes all of these pieces come together. And I asked Ian to help for two reasons. One, I needed a volunteer, and it was a good learning moment for him. And it was great because one of the things we've always done here at First Church, whether it's with our youth at church or with our scouts, we're always teaching them. And it was a great learning moment for Ian. So we also have this attitude that, it's only a small challenge. We've never met a challenge we couldn't do. And we saw this rope. We said, what do we do? So luckily, there's plenty of websites on how to splice. And it's not a skill we use every day. Bob, can you go to the next slide, please? So here's the interesting thing, and we were up there for about 4 hours, and I think Ken remembers coming because we had to go down to the hardware store. We were trying to get these little brackets to try to get this rope to swing, but we spent a lot of time talking about, this rope, natural fibers, is made by threads, right? Basically little fibers that make this big, strong rope. I said it's like members of our church. Right? We all pitch in, and when we work together, we can move mountains. And we do it all the time. But it was broken. And we had to mend this rope and bring it together. Now, if you have a daughter, this looks like a simple braid. I don't have daughters. So this was an unnatural thing for me. Bob, next slide, please. But here's the thing. It took us a few hours to weave this back carefully, to get it in place where it was just as strong, or if not stronger, than the original rope. We put it together. We thought we did a good job hanging it correctly because there was all the nooks and crannies. Remember, the steeple was added after. So we got it there. I think Al Bean came later and helped us realign everything, right? Because we weren't sure how it got through. As a historian, we got it running. But the biggest thing here was not only did our faith get that rope together, but it also allowed the kids to pull the bell, and it also is something so small and minuscule, you wouldn't imagine the impact it had. Because we count on that, right? That bell brings us together in many ways, just like this rope did. So the interesting thing here is, next slide, Bob? It's very interesting. There's a little trough in there, and the biggest thing we had to do is make sure this rope would fit in this trough. And not only that, we had to make sure the ends were tight so it wouldn't get stuck again. And we had to make sure there was enough rope, and we checked for weak spots, and we kind of rebuilt the rope as best as we could. But the funny thing is, we were able to fix this rope this time. Sometimes there are things that can't be fixed, and we have to come forward and get some funds to do that. Now, when we can, as a group, we come together and we overcome, improvise, adapt. We have a can-do attitude, but sometimes we do need financial resources to keep the church going. So I just want to share 2 things with you. Ian learned a lot about splicing, but this was also the first time as an adult going on many youth projects, being part of the church, that he finally understood what it took to keep the church running. It wasn't just shoveling the mulch, raking the leaves, cleaning up. There were things that we don't see behind the scenes that need our help. This one we were able to fix, but there's a lot of things that we need your support. So be like that fiber in the rope. Let's all help and give a little bit to make it work for everyone. Thank you.